Today, we're going to be bringing you a cold weather special. Freezing temperatures are expected to carry on into the next week. So we are kicking off by finding out what help you can claim during this cold weather snaps. And now finance expert, benefits expert, Peter Komolafe is going to be here to explain exactly how you can claim hundreds of pounds off your bills when the temperatures are plummeting as much. Now, if you've got a question about getting help, pick up the phone, or maybe you've had a great tip to share about keeping your house warm when it's icy, then do let us know. Then we'll continue our conversation. Should the rules be relaxed for cold weather payments? To qualify for cold weather payment scheme, you need to meet specific criteria, which we're going to go through in a moment, and already be eligible for certain benefits. But should these rules actually be relaxed a little bit more so that more people can be entitled to cold weather payments? I'd love to know your thoughts on that. And after that, we're going to be asking this: is it okay on working from home during cold weather? The law currently has actually got no minimum temperature that is considered safe to work in. So whilst it's cold as it is outside, is it fair to make people go all the way into the office during the icy temperatures? Or should anyone who can be allowed to work from home? What are your thoughts on that? Let me know. The number is 0207 862 2222. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute, plus any call setup fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. We're also on Facebook or Twitter. Search for Jeremy Vine on 5 and use the hashtag Alexis Conran. And you can also start emailing us. Just use the email address alexisconran and channel5.com. Now, a cold snap has seen a lot of the UK facing a lot of snow and a lot of ice. It's plunged as low as -10 in parts of the country, and it's expected to continue well into next week. I'm joined by finance and benefits expert Peter Komolafe, and we're going to be laying out exactly what kind of help that you can get during the cold weather. But first up, you two as well. Thanks for joining us, Vicky and Angela. Now, Vicky, what kind of household do you run? When it gets this cold, do you just crank up the thermostat, or do you just stick on extra jumpers?
It depends if my husband's around, because he's on watch on the thermostat. Are we actually really cold?
I know that too.
Are you even married if they're not doing that?
We're married to the same man.
That's the whole of the show, I think. But I'm perpetually cold. I'm always cold. So I'm that, woman who always needs the blankets. Whereas I've got a teenager who's constantly hot, and so we're all at war in our house, to be honest. But we are spending a fortune on heating at the moment, as is so much of the UK.
Angela, jumpers or thermostat?
Well, ideally thermostat. I think part of the problem is that the weather isn't behaving in a textbook way. Now, I live in Manchester, and it was starting to get a bit relatively milder. And I got off the train yesterday in London and it was freezing. And we normally think north-south divide the other way. We also think that the temperature is going to rise at certain times and fall at certain times. I have the tussle with the thermostat, and also the fact that I have my own internal central heating, being a woman of a certain age. But you've got to be, We'll talk about it afterwards. We're close. But like absolutely, as Vicky says, different members of the family have different requirements. I also get Raynaud's, which is when your fingers go freezing cold, even if the rest of you is warm.
Okay, well, look, plenty of people are feeling the cold. We'll get into that later. Plenty of people are feeling the cold. So let's have a look and see, because there is help out there for people, but I think the problem is it's a bit complicated. A lot of people don't know what they are entitled to. So, Peter, you're here to help us out. Let's kick off. So, what should we talk about first?
I think the cold weather payment scheme is probably the first one, and coming down today, very, very cold. My fingers were freezing. So the cold weather payment scheme is essentially a scheme where you get a payment from the government if you have a period where the temperature averages 0 degrees or falls below 0 degrees for a period of 7 days. 7 consecutive days, though, however, I must add there.
So just to clear that up, it has to hit 0 or around 0 at some point in the day for 7 consecutive days.
That's right.
And it's only until March, right?
And it's only till March. So this started in November. It's going to run up until the end of March this year. But essentially for each period, so for each 7 days, the government is going to pay £25 towards your energy bills to help you. Now, you don't have to apply for this. You should automatically just get this already. But it is worthwhile noting that it won't impact any benefits that you have, but you do need to be in receipt of some benefit.
OK, so this is the key, isn't it? Because people listening up and say, well, do I qualify? So how do we find out who can qualify for the cold weather payments? What benefits should you be in receipt of already in order to qualify?
Right, so the list can actually be quite extensive. The best thing to do is actually to go onto the government website and just double check. But generally speaking, if you're in receipt of universal credit, income tax, that kind of stuff, you should be eligible for it. But sometimes you have to have other criteria that you need to meet as well. So the best thing is check on the government website just to make sure and check that you actually qualify.
And it's not, of course, I got a bit confused. So, you know, the winter fuel payments, they're not linked in any way.
No, we're going to get to those later on. But yeah, this is a completely
That's a very
separate
complicated
payment.
thing, yes.
And this has only been paid out 14 times to
That's right.
potentially each household since November.
That's right.
And it's only £25, which is quite a nominal amount.
But it's £25 per cold day.
Period.
Oh, per period.
Yeah, for the 7
there you go.
days.
7 days.
So for 7 days, you get £25.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
And do they check that you're spending that on the heating?
They don't check, but it is £25 for 7 days. So is it really enough to actually compensate for the additional energy that you're using, given the fact that energy prices have actually gone up recently?
Has that changed, Peter, at all? Because again, 3 years ago, we were all paying a lot less for our energy. Was it still £25 3 years ago and still £25 now?
Well, this was introduced from November last year. So this is a special measurement that is there to actually help people. But is £25 really going to be enough? I think for my household, I don't think it would be.
Buy a pair of gloves or something.
OK, so that's cold weather payments that we've got there. Let's move on to the next one, which is the warm home discount.
Yes.
Tell us about this one.
Right, so this one is a one-off payment. It's £150. Now, with the previous one, you get paid the money into your account. This one gets paid, it's deducted from your bill. So they work with your energy provider specifically for this. So it's worthwhile just making sure that you actually qualify for this. Again, it's automatic. But if you do believe that you qualify for this, you probably need to check with your energy supplier, particularly if you're in Scotland, you're on low income, because it's not automatic. So it's really important that you're proactive with it.
OK. Do give us a call on any of these if you have any questions. So do get in touch. Peter will answer your questions. And also tell us if you've had experience claiming for these ones, the cold weather payments, the warm home discount. Was it easy for you to get them? Did they come through OK? Let us know. Let's just share the knowledge with everybody else watching, because it can get a bit daunting. Plenty of you have been getting in touch on social media. Rose on Facebook says, I used to get warm home payment, but government changes mean I no longer get it. Apparently, my house doesn't qualify anymore, even though my health issues are the same. Jeffrey on Twitter says, what is the point in trying hard to get your full stamps before being a pensioner when you get less than someone that's not got full stamps due to all the added benefits? Again, confusions there, Peter, from many people. But the warm home discount, I mean, as with all these things we've said, go on the government website, make sure that you qualify. The warm home discount, should your first port of call be your energy supplier rather than the government website?
Sure, 100%. For this, because they're working directly with the energy suppliers, you want to check them because it's a deduction from your bill.
OK.
So it may be a case that you notice it, you may not notice it, but it is definitely worthwhile checking just to make sure that it has been deducted.
And again, you'd qualify on this if you are on specific benefits.
That's right, yes.
OK. Let's move on to the next one, which is the one that you mentioned, Angela, which is the winter fuel payments. Tell us about those.
Right, so winter fuel payments, if you are born before September 25th, 1957, so you're going to be around about 66, 67, which lines up with state pension roughly, you will receive, the payment is between £250 and £600 altogether. It's automatic. So generally speaking, if you are in receipt of state pension, your state pensionable age, this payment will come to you automatically. But again, it is worthwhile checking. It is inclusive of the pensioner's cost of living payment, which is about £150 to £300 of that. So it's extra help for people who are, pensionable age that need a little bit of help during a cold snap like this one.
We were wondering in the office, is there a chance that you will qualify for multiple help? So perhaps you get the winter fuel payments and the warm home discount.
That's right.
Or are they exclusive?
No, it is very, very possible that you might qualify for the winter fuel payments, for example, but you also might get the cold weather payments and vice versa as well. So,
Is the last one means tested for the pension age, or do you have to be applying for extra help, or is it kind of a blanket?
It's a blanket, so you should automatically have
Rod
that
Stewart
come
gets
through
it.
regardless.
Oh,
Rod
good.
Stewart, Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, they're all eligible if they're...
Well, I suppose they could choose to donate it.
They
if
could,
don't
but
wanna use it.
what I'm saying is it makes the point that it's a blanket.
It's a blanket, it's for everybody.
In any way, yeah.
Let's hear from Louise, who's called from Manchester. Louise, good afternoon. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Alexis, and to the panel. Basically, I just wanted to ask Peter. I get the £25 cold weather payment.
Yeah.
And basically what it is like for 6 nights a week, we're putting extra money into our meters to keep us warm because of my disabilities. But when it comes to the 7th day, it goes back up over the 0 temperature, we don't get anything. And is there any way the government could move on that? Because we're still spending money on those 6 evenings a week, and then if that temperature's gone up above 0 on the 7th day.
Louise, thank you. It's a good point. That question it is really unfair because Louise has already spent the money for the 6 days.
That's right.
If the 7th day gets hot, that £25 doesn't kick in.
It doesn't kick in because the way this was built is to count 7 consecutive days. So without the 7 consecutive days, the eligibility doesn't kick in. So unfortunately, you can't claim for it for 6 days. It has to be the 7 days. And there is a question there around, is there a way that you can tweak this to make it a little bit more fair for people and so that it becomes a little bit more effective in the practicalities of how this actually works? Because the idea is great, but if you have a cold snap for 5 days or 6 days and you can't get anything
and imagine
for
if your boiler goes out or something and you have to have cold showers, 7 days? You know, it's the equivalent of that you're suffering for a period.
And I know we're a small island, and obviously because we're a small island, we have very variable temperatures and weather, as I alluded to before. On what do they base this kind of algorithm? Because sometimes weather forecasts conflict. Does it have to be, is it after the fact? So they've got a thermometer at Heathrow and they've said, right, OK, on 7 consecutive days, that thermometer only registered -1. I mean, how? And also because of the geographical variations. You live at the bottom of a hill. It's warmer than if you live at the top of a hill.
I thought it was down to predicting 0 or under, as well as actually hitting that. That's what it said in the paper.
I would imagine what they're doing in practice is they're actually monitoring the weather and what the forecast for the weather over a period of time and what recorded temperatures are for that period of time. I mean, the payment kicks in 14 days after the cold snap ends as an automatic thing.
So you have to wait for
14 days. So you still have to wait
for people who are living on prepayment meters, they have to wait for that money 14 days after they've already spent it.
Absolutely, yeah.
OK.
It's worth noting as well that people are having terrible symptoms to this cold. You've got a greater chance of having a heart attack, stroke. It's going to apply more pressure to the NHS. So it's like, are they actually really helping enough?
Well, we're going to get to that actually later in the show.
So just as an example, there are some areas, there are about 4 areas in England at the moment that are providing support of up to £350 for this. It is very much dependent on your local area. And I know sometimes people don't feel as though they can actually ask or pick up the phone for these types of things. If you're struggling, it's really important that you do.
But this is money that your council has to give out. And we know that councils are struggling at the moment. So will it depend which council you're in, the amount of money that you're going to get?
That's right. So each local council gets a different amount, but they have the responsibility then to give out funds according to the applicants that ask for assistance, essentially.
And how would you qualify? What criteria do you need to meet for that?
Again, you have to be in receipt of some benefit. So again, check on the government website to make sure that you meet them. But generally speaking, if you're on universal credit, that kind of stuff, child tax credits, you should be able to apply for this.
OK, Vicky, I know you've got a question for Peter as well.
I mean, are there any schemes available for children or families with children at home that are struggling? It's incredibly hard for families all over the UK.
It is, yeah. So for children specifically, there is one which was paid out in Scotland, and it's called the Child Winter Heating Payment, effectively. Now, that one was paying £235.70, but that is only in Scotland. There isn't anything that is equivalent to that in the UK or Ireland at this point in time. I think what you'll find is with a lot of these benefits that are available, they look at it from a household point of view in terms of, in opposed to just looking at it from a child point of view.
It's worrying because, you know, babies, for example, newborn babies are meant to be in a temperature of about 19 degrees.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your Channel 5 News covered a couple who'd brought a baby home to a freezing cold house. It's so incredibly, it's tragic.
And again, I think it leads to this conversation of when we're thinking about these solutions, how much nuance can you go into and how can you build something that is going to be perfect and suitable and usable for all of the households across all of the needs. And I imagine it's very, very difficult in government trying to come up with these type of schemes. But I do think in those kind of situations for newborn babies...
And the elderly, that are so vulnerable.
OK, let's pause there because Joanne's got in touch from Lancashire. Joanne, welcome to the show. What would you like to say, Joanne?
Hello, a question for Peter.
Yeah.
My boiler broke down a couple of days ago, so I've no heating at all.
Ooh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm on PIP because I'm disabled. I'm a wheelchair user and heart problems, etc. Is there anything I can claim to help me with a new boiler? Because obviously I can't afford to put a new one in.
Peter, what can Joanne do?
That's a really...
I've got just one more thing. I'm on contribution-based ESA, not the... what's the other one? Income-based. So I'm on the wrong benefit to claim most things anyway.
OK. I would say in this example, it would be worthwhile perhaps applying for the Household Support Fund and speaking to your local authority, because where you're in a situation where you don't have any heating right now, I would argue that you're probably high risk right now, and those funds are created specifically for these types of situations. So, you know, pick up the phone to your local authority and just tell them your situation so that you need some emergency intervention to help you with this, because the cost of a boiler is expensive. You haven't got that money lying around, and it will take time as well.
You know how you would call the AA for a problem with your car? If that happens and you don't have some kind of home start scheme or whatever, you know, where you can immediately get a plumber, is there accessibility to that in terms of people that are in very challenged circumstances to be able to get somebody out to fix things?
Well, what you can also do is if you speak to the energy providers as well, because there is a vulnerable list on the energy providers that if
I was wondering whether Joanne would qualify for that.
If you meet the criteria, they have to provide some intervention. So it's also worthwhile speaking to the supplier and saying, look, this is my situation. Do I qualify for this, or what help can you render immediately? OK,
Joanne, thank you for the call. Definitely speak to your energy provider and the council, because you may well qualify for the household support scheme. Let's take another call. Veronica in East Sussex. Veronica, good afternoon. What would you like to say?
Hello, yes. I just wanted to know, how do I go about claiming for these things? Because I'm disabled and... I do get attendance allowance. Am I entitled to any of these?
OK. Veronica makes a very good point. A lot of people, and this is why we're doing this today, are very confused because there's so many different things. And these are the four that we've picked out. There is more out there that people can apply for. Where does someone like Veronica even start?
Well, things like the cold weather payment, it's automatic, so you should already be eligible for that if you fit that criteria. Some of these, like the warm home discounts and the winter fuel payments, they would have sent out letters to you. So if you feel that or think that you qualify, you've not received a letter, then it's worthwhile just picking up the phone to, for example, the warm homes discount scheme and actually saying, look, this is my situation. I think I qualify, but I haven't had notification of this just yet. Can you check? And just open dialogue. But it's really important.
Is there a central place that someone like Veronica can go to, whether it's online or maybe a physical place? Let's remember that not everybody has got access online. Yeah. Is there a number that you can call and basically tell them your situation and someone can say, OK, these are the benefits you should be entitled to? Is there any way you can go?
I think the first port of call for a lot of these would be to go onto the .gov website. Yep. Also think about other charities as well which are out there. So you've got places like Entitled To. They're very, very good. Yep. They're very, very good. And that's a telephone line. You can pick up the phone and they can actually guide you through some of this stuff as well and answer questions and really help you
can ring your energy supplier as well. They've got the numbers of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OK. Well, look, all that information can be a bit confusing. So, and this is not an exhaustive list of everything that is out there. There is more out there that can help people. Now, if you want more information, the best place to start really is Citizens Advice as well. So you can call them on 0808 223 1133. That's 0808 223 1133. That is the number. You can also visit citizensadvice.org if you have access online, but do give them a call. They've been on the show before. They're very, very good. They're very, very strong with actually being able to give you the right information and point you in the right direction. As Peter said, there are other charities out there entitled to, which make sure that people get the benefits that they're entitled to. Let's take another call. Many of you wanting to get in touch and ask your questions. Maria in South Shields. Maria, good afternoon. What would you like to ask?
Hi, everybody. I'm on universal credit. I do work as well and do have a disability. It's a £300 from the government gives you to the energy supplier. And this was from last year. Have I able to even get it?
That payment that everybody got, the £300, that's been discontinued.
That's been discontinued now. That is no longer available.
But would someone like Maria qualify for something if she's on universal credit and she's going out to work? Would she qualify for some of these?
Potentially, you could qualify for the cold weather payments, potentially. That would be probably the first port of call to have a look at. Maybe warm home discount. So maybe check with those two. But again, if you're speaking to any, Citizens Advice or Entitled To, it's really important to have these conversations and open dialogue because they can actually help you understand, right, based on your circumstances, this is what we think you're eligible for. And they can actually walk you through the process as well. Yeah. So it's really important to try and reach out to those kind of things. But off the top of my head, I think cold weather payments, possibly you might be able to qualify for.
OK. Maria, thank you. Thank you all for your calls on this. Now, as Peter's just explained, how only those that are on certain benefits can claim, for example, the £25 cold weather payment. Someone is only eligible if the temperature where they live is at or below 0 degrees, and that has been for 7 consecutive days. And you must also be receiving certain benefits in order to claim this. So we're asking, is this fair? Do we need to broaden the amount of people who qualify for help from the government? Angela, what do you think? Are enough people getting the help that they need?
Well, I think we have to start by looking at the pot. We know we're suffering the highest tax burden since, the date keeps changing about how long that's been going on for, but it's significantly high. The spiralling cost of living crisis. And the fact that a lot of people, the so-called squeezed middle, are suffering as well. So in answer to the question about, is it fair and are we doing the best that we can do, I think there needs to be more discretion built into the system, bearing in mind what the callers have said so far about the complex nature of the system. We've shown that, we've only highlighted 4 options. And I think, understandably, people who are on benefits by definition are suffering. That's why they're asking for state help. Let's set aside the whole gravy train argument that, is the benefit system being abused? We need to break the cycle of welfare dependency. Those are separate questions about having an effective benefit system. But I think more needs to be done, although I'm not the accountant, I'm not the Chancellor, as to helping people who may be going to work but are really struggling. The whole point of a cold weather payment is that the weather is extreme enough to say we are heating our houses in a way that is not expected at this time of year. And therefore,
it's just going to get worse.
And it's going to get worse. All of these things. So you're 2 people who've worked hard, who pay into the system, but are still struggling to make ends meet. is there anything that the government can do?
Well, that's the big question. I think there are millions, and I know people who aren't necessarily in receipt of any benefits, but they found through the cost of living crisis their energy price, costs soar, and they cannot continue to fund all of this. So I think there is that squeeze middle, as we're saying, and what help the government can render. Where's the money going to come from is going to be obviously the huge argument that people are going to talk about here, but I think there needs to be more help.
As we've seen as well, if people are living month to month, these schemes are not that helpful.
Yeah.
Because
well, this is what I'm fascinated to hear. I want to hear from you at home. Get in touch. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Are you one of those people that doesn't qualify for any of the things that we've talked about? You don't qualify, you're not in receipt of any benefits, and you're not getting help. Are you struggling? Would you like to see help come your way, even though you've got a full-time job perhaps, or you're working, you're not claiming any benefits, but are you struggling, and do you think the government should be helping people like you? Do get in touch. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Of course, also, Peter, we have to remember that this comes on the back of a cost of living crisis, off the back of pandemic. I do want to mention self-employed people, because they were the ones that, remember, we were talking about them, the 3 million that didn't get any help during the pandemic. Many of those people went through all their savings and then out of the pandemic went into a cost of living crisis and now are having to struggle through without those savings to pay those bills, to put food on the table, keep the roof over their head. Is it reasonable to expect a government to start opening their coffers and saying, well, actually, the weather's a bit too cold, let's give people money off their energy bills? Is that reasonable? Is it realistic?
I think we're talking about cold weather here, but I think when you look at it from a more broader point of view, and I'll add another thing onto the equation there, interest rates, inflation.
Of course, forgot about that,
That's been a huge thing for a lot of people, certainly for the self-employed. We're talking about cold weather payments, which is kind of a small microcosm of whether the government should help a little bit more, but the pressures are so much more beyond that. And so I think there is an opportunity potentially for government to be helpful in more practical ways, because there are pressures elsewhere. And I do coaching all the time. And when I sit down with people and I look at people's finances, like the energy bill cost is absolutely insane.
So should we have seen perhaps a continuation, Vicky, of that, what was it, £300 that everybody got off their bills? Everybody. It wasn't means tested. Should we have seen a continuation of that into this very cold winter?
I mean, we're not seeing normal temperatures, are we, increasing? So I think, and I would say means tested is a good way of assessing
that becomes
the
more
vulnerability, so that we're really helping the vulnerable. But if you look at, say, working mums, for example, only now have we seen the subsidisation from age 2. So prior to that, there was no support for childcare. It was 3, and 3 years out of action in an industry also applies a lot of pressure. So I think in that respect, the government are helping. I think 2 years still feels a bit late for childcare support. It'd be great if it was at the 1 year mark. But because and particularly post-Brexit, where lots of sectors are struggling to get staff. So actually, if you want to work, we want to make it easier for people to get into employment. Whether it should be a blanket support, obviously in an ideal world, but not everybody needs that support. Let's focus on the people that really do need it and are incredibly vulnerable.
Let's see what people have been getting in touch. Elizabeth on Twitter says everyone should get help with their energy bills. I suppose that's what we're talking about. Does it make sense to give everyone help with their energy bills?
The richest 2%, they don't need that help, or people that are over 100k a year possibly don't need that. They can deal with the rise in inflation and their wages correlated with that.
It's a fiscal question, isn't it? I mean, I talk about money and finances. My career's been in financial services for a long time. The root problem is, where does it come from? And if it is going to come from taxation, well, how is the taxation pot being spent currently? That's a hornet's nest on its own. Can we be a bit more efficient? Because I think when we look at the reality of the world right now, there is definite need for more help. but where does it come from?
Okay.
And that's the problem for...
All right, let me read this other message as well, which I think we've sort of touched on, but it's very interesting that Kay on Twitter has picked up on it. Definitely needs relaxing it. It has to be below 0 for a week, even though it can be 1 degree all week and you get nothing. I think it is a bit baggy, isn't it? The temperature has to be around 0. And as we heard earlier from a caller, if you get 6 days and you've just fed the meter in order to keep the heating on, and the 7th day you get this bright, lovely, warm day, you get no money. Yeah. I mean, something like that has to be looked at, hasn't it?
I think it has to be looked at. And another thing as well that's worthwhile mentioning here is, I don't know if people remember, but I think it was last year or so, there was a lot of uproar about companies putting people onto prepayment meters who had...
Yes, forcing people on.
That has recently been relaxed. So companies are going to be able to literally force people onto prepayment meters. That's going to be coming around the corner. And in periods of times where you've got a cold snap like this, that can be bad news for a lot of households who are struggling to meet their energy costs.
I mean, to me, the whole thing is a mess. And I know it's very easy to sit hand-wringing in a warm studio and say, look at it. But it defies all logic to me to make it, to not fillet it down into something very simple. We've only, as you said before, Alexis, we identified 4 schemes.
Yes.
OK? That's 4 different ways, and am I eligible? 3 out of 4, as one caller said, she works part-time. I don't understand why the government doesn't have a more simplistic approach. That way it could be much clearer about who is eligible, who needs it, who's swinging the lead a bit, who is in dire, absolute demand of something like this. Because at the moment, I fear for people who are, that the genuine causes may are potentially missing out because the approach is so unnecessarily complex. Yeah. So we have got people, and also people feel the cold in different ways. Do you remember the Beast from the East a few years ago?
Yes, yeah.
That was after March. Yeah. OK, so you've got your deadline in March, and suddenly it's -6.
Very good point. Perhaps it needs to be looked into as how much money is the household bringing in and how much of that money is expected to go into the bills, regardless of whether you're on benefits or not. Yeah. If you're having to spend a disproportionate amount of your income on your energy bills, then perhaps you should qualify for some help. But look, we're going to have to leave it there. Peter, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you in the studio.